Hello, and welcome to the Nintendo Archive. I am your host, Holden, and this is episode 3. So, in today's episode, I'll have impressions of a number of games I've been playing, and of course, a review of our next Wii game. And there is no listener mail, of course, so then the show will conclude after my review. I've been playing a number of games at the moment, still going on with Mario Kart Double Dash, though I feel like I'm going to wrap up on that, on account of the fact that I got I forget the name of it, but that golden car after winning All Cup Grand Prix on Mirror mode, so yeah, it's kind of what I wanted to do, and it's a slick car, so now that we've done that, me and my sister have done that, we'll probably wrap up or move on to another Mario Kart. But we're still playing it. Oh, I guess that says something. I also finished up Castlevania The Adventure, which I had talked about last week. And then I moved on to another Gameboy game, just because, for consistency. And that Gameboy game is Donkey Kong for the Game Boy, or Donkey Kong 94 as it's known. And I think it's known by that because just in the purchasing of that game, the game doesn't actually, on the 3DS Virtual Console anyway, doesn't make it clear if it's just a port of the arcade game or if it's in fact a new game. Even maybe it was just specifying the trademark was 1981, but on the eShop it says games published 1981, and that threw me for a loop. So all to say, the game is hard to specify outside of just calling it Donkey Kong 94. And as far as remakes go, it's a real good one. It's not even a remake. It's frankly a new game. It's only a remake in that the game starts with the first 4 levels from Donkey Kong, and immediately something's there's a few. You can tell right away that it's a different kind of game, though. At least I could, in that while I was trying to go up the girders on the first level, I completely circumvented the ladders that you would otherwise need with effectively a backflip, or much like a side flip from Mario 64. Sorry. And yeah, so like, oh, well, this is going to be a whole different kind of beast right from the get-go. And so those 4 levels conclude, and then you move on to a world map, and from then on the game's its own thing. The music thus far is really good. I mean, there's something about Game Boy sound hardware that I like. I don't know why. Maybe it's less tinny than NES sound chips. I couldn't know for certain, but that's my notion. The levels are, I don't know if there's any true standouts, but I would say the best thing about the game thus far is the amount of player actions you have at your disposal. I mean, frankly, I think I've already mentioned the side flip or back flip that seems like I could be crazy, but I unlikely. That seems like a precursor to the famous side flip or back flip of Mario 64. And there's even a handstand jump, which was relegated to trees mostly, or poles in Mario Kart or Mario 64, which is, I guess, impressive that this little Game Boy game has such a versatile movement system that I'd only otherwise seen in the 3D games. And that's the best thing I can say about it. The levels are, I think it does a good job of being both a platform and a puzzle game, and in my experience, or at least my recollection, puzzle platformers often are too, where was I? In my opinion, puzzle platformers that I've played thus far are more about the puzzle side of things, and the jumping is, in any sort of a movement, is rudimentary, unless we're talking about Metroidvanias, which, have a puzzle aspect to them, but that's a different bag from what I'm talking about. Now, of course, in, say, Trine 2, which I haven't played a lot of, the thief lady did have quite a few tricks up her sleeve, and so did the knight, I guess. but that was all very situational when you could use it. In the case of Donkey Kong 94, you can employ his versatile moveset almost whenever. Some of it is situational, like he has an ability to, I don't know what you call that in the circus, but he can effectively spin on a wire, which would return later in Mario Sunshine. You can spin on a wire and get a good jump going. And he has to have the wire around to get that done, but everything else, it's not, such as a special handstand jump he has, is usable anywhere. It may not be profitable, but it's workable. And the game, one of the things the game does well is that it shows you the existence of these moves without stopping you in your tracks. Like they integrate them into little story blurbs that happen in between each little world map when Mario is pursuing Donkey Kong. And so it's a very elegant, very elegant. The game, I would say thus far, is general very elegant. It's not too hard too, so it feels quite breezy to play, though this might be when either Nintendo knew that their Game Boy demographic was younger, or the Game Boy, at least later on, was more removed from arcade design templates and moving towards a more gentle playing experience. So you get a save after 4 levels, and each level's not very long. So even if you have to redo 3 levels in a Donkey Kong boss fight, it won't be much of a thing. I don't know how long the game is. I'm in World 3. Yeah, World 3. I'm about to finish it up. It's thus far it's a really, really good game. Really an excellent game. I feel like it's talked about in sort of this aloof way, like it's not unknown, but it's kind of, I guess, on being on the original Game Boy hardware, it's more than once removed at this rate from pop culture, but it's really good. I really like it. I know it's a predecessor to Mario versus Donkey Kong and the GBA, but from what I can tell, they're kind of different things, like outright. And I would say I haven't played a lot of Mario versus Donkey Kong in general, but I would say from what I have played, I much prefer Donkey Kong 94 to it. Yeah, a solid edition all around. I'm looking forward to playing more of it. But I have been playing a little less. I sort of slowed down on it because of this next game I'll be talking about, and that game is for the GameCube, and it is 007 Everything or Nothing. Originally, I purchased this game on eBay. I wasn't going to do that because I figured it was a known quantity, but the refresh was definitely the right choice, because it turns out I don't think I had ever actually even beaten the game. I think I had it when I was younger, maybe 10 or so, and I think I revisited it when I was 18 or 19 even, but yeah, only selectively doing so. So this is the first time I just beat it this morning, and this is the first time I've played it wholesale, having just beaten it this morning. I think it holds up better than I remember and worse than I remember at the same time. So there are, for one thing, I think it's a perfect example of what I would consider like a 7 out of 10 game, like the best a 7 out of 10 game can be, in my opinion, in that it has a lot of great ideas that it moderately pulls off, some better than others. For one thing, I thought it was a kind of a predecessor to Gears of War, and it effectively is, because it's a third-person Bond game. And it's a third-person Bond game where you have a rudimentary cover system and a effectively a enemy lock on, so you can snap to enemies really quickly. You'd think it'd take the fun out of it, and it kind of does, but it's not actually too different from snap to iron sight system that COD has going on. And so yeah, you lock onto them, and then you can adjust with the C stick to aim for their head and upper body to get it done quick. It works pretty well. Sometimes the snaps to a guy who's farther to the farther guy rather than the closer one. And, that's... The game probably knows what it's doing, and I shouldn't question that. Better the guy with the little pistol 100 feet away than the guy 10 feet away with the shotgun peppering you. So, but yeah, that's a little bit of a problem with it. It does actually have a pretty, outside of the shooting, has a bunch of comprehensive other things going on in the third person sections. There's some stealth. I wouldn't say it's hugely effective, but it's there. There's a melee system where your two hands are actually mapped to two different buttons. I don't know why they do that. It's not terribly useful, but it's nice. And a counter and a throw, kind of pretty comprehensive. In melee items you can pick up and throw and yada yada yada. And gadgets, they focus a lot on that. But a lot going on in that. And then beyond that, there's a wide variety of vehicles that the game employs throughout its duration. And some are better than others, but it's an impressive array of them. And from what I remember, is why it's good that I played it now, and then rather than focusing on what I could recollect, is the game far more emphasizes vehicles than I figured. I thought it was mostly a third-person shooter, but it could be as much as half and a half when it comes to how much time you spend with either component. So you have a motorcycle, which is probably the highlight of the vehicles, and then you have a selection of different cars, and even a truck at one point, and then you have like 2 tank missions. The vehicle missions are based in kind of a proto open world city that I think they reuse a little bit, but not in any way that's detrimental, frankly. I will say, the vehicles, I'm not even certain I could say they control badly. I've been playing a lot of Double Dash, so maybe that influenced the manner in which I tried to use the car initially, and holding down A all the time, which is what you do in Mario Kart, or the gas pedal effectively. You will have a hard time making it around corners. And initially I thought maybe that was some bad design, but I think when driving a normal vehicle, you're feathering the gas. You're not holding it down the entire time. And so, as far as I know, I wouldn't say the vehicles are designed poorly at all. It's just a matter of acclimating to them. I haven't played a Grand Theft Auto game, really, so I don't know how they handle that. But that was the one thing I noticed. Of course, the vehicles are kitted out with a number of gadgets. The motorcycle has the best gadget, in which is just flamethrowers out either side of it, which is nice and fun. And it can also slide if you need to scoot under something while going full speed, which is fun. And the car has a number of missiles, electromagnetic pulse launchers. The acid slick is kind of nice to use. And machine guns and rockets. I prefer to use the machine guns over the rockets because I feel it's more, I don't want to say realistic, but more reasonable, a little more challenging. Have to actually get good at staying on track, whereas the rockets are just easy mode, so I didn't use them much. And yeah, those are the vehicles I can't really lob a complaint against them. They might actually be more refined than the shooting stuff, but it's hard to say. But moving on from the general mechanics and modes of the game, one of the better things about it, since it is a 007 game, it does capture the essence of Bond very well, partially because of a high budget. I mean, it looks really good for a GameCube game, especially Pierce Brosnan's likeness, and his voice talent's really good in it too, so it gets that down. Willem Dafoe's featured, and he's not bad in it either. There are some takes that you can clearly see as being kind of one take, particularly with John Cleese. It doesn't land, but it's nice that he's in there. And yeah, the production value overall is really, really good. Like even his I think his P99 would be his gun model. Like looking at it close up, it's a really good looking gun model for a GameCube. And moreover, because it is a Bond game, it makes the targeting system that it uses more understandable to the source material, because James Bond doesn't seem to have any trouble aiming. Older James Bond, especially, with just pull off anything without a hitch. So it makes sense, and all the vehicle stuff also, because it's a James Bond game, is utilized very well and fits the property extremely well. So that's the best thing I can say about the game in a sentence. Like, its mission is to feel like a James Bond game, and it definitely succeeds. And the gadgets that it uses, it doesn't use them in extensively, but the spider in particular and some of the coin grenades are very useful overall, and they again add to the aura of a 007 property. And the story even isn't bad for a video game story. It's pretty good. It's a nice campy James Bond outing. That's the word I was looking for, an outing. This game captures a James Bond outing really well. But as I said, I wouldn't give it more than like a 7 out of 10, not that I'm reviewing it right now, thus far. It does have a co-op mode that I needed to try. And I remember my brother's playing it, and it seemed quite extensive and very good. It could swing the game. It could make me think more of the game than I currently do, is all. The game isn't as far from perfect, though, and that's why I'd say I wouldn't rate it higher than 7 out of 10, because mostly the main issue with the game is its, for one, its checkpoint system. Its enemy placement, its enemy spawning isn't very good. Its level design, I don't know if it's great, like particularly the shooting sections of the game. A lot of the mission objectives in those is just find this little, box or a switch and open it. And when you open the switch, it always spawns in more enemies into this kind of arena. And many of the levels, some of them are kind of linear and other ones are arenas. Some of the levels take place in South America, and I don't know what you call it. Like, effectively, it's kind of like a big open area with a gallery going all around. Again, don't know the cultural term for that kind of an interior, but that's what a lot of the levels amount to. And so enemies will just pour in every time you hit a little button. So you'll get shot in the back by an enemy that, was wandering around this open area for a while. I don't particularly enjoy that, and if you do die from that, you have to restart the level from scratch, which normally isn't a big deal because the levels are kind of short. But on some of the longer ones, it's why. Since the different portions of the levels can be, quite different and are just inherently delineated, you think they'd put a checkpoint where there's a change in pace, but no, they don't do that, and I don't think there's any fundamental reason for doing that, like outside of the developers were just dumb, or pressed for time or ran out of funding, any of the above. But yeah, it's not any kind of authorship that I'd point to. It's just, a silly, very, overt oversight. And yeah, other problems are like the enemy placement sometimes don't make a lot of sense. I think in the final mission, you kill a number of dudes and then a cargo bay door opens and there's a guy directly behind you. I don't know what, again, caused him to appear there, but then you'll get shot in the back and then restart the entire level over again. And other times enemies will move through obstacles that you couldn't move through, like an electricity field, and I think it's called the Machinery of Evil level. It's overall pretty terrible level, frankly. And rudimentary level design, of course, is another problem. But again, all very short, so it's fun enough despite all these issues. I would say that, in general, like, to digress a little bit, 3D games, when they do have things that frustrate me, it's very rarely, intentional or well thought out, if it is intentional, at least as I see it. While 2D games of the NES era and going on forward, their frustrations, from what I've seen thus far, always have a purpose and an ability to answer that frustration. For instance, playing Mega Man 4, the Brightman stage. And in the Brightman stage, you have these little platforms that are on a semicircular track. And the minute you jump on them, they will follow through the track. And then when they come to the end, they will fall. So you'll need to evacuate said platform in a hurry. And after about, let's say, 3 or 4 of these tracks in Mega Man, towards the end of Brightman stage, you have to jump to what is the end of the level. But in mid-jump, you run into an enemy, and then you fall short of the platform and die. And the reason you ran into the enemy, or at least the reason I did, is because it is an enemy that they've pre-established as this little light bot. And if you shoot this light bot, the entire stage will go dark, and that is not to your benefit, so it's usually better to let him pass. And so, at the end of this particular platforming gauntlet, it turns out that despite your apprehension, you have to shoot the light bot as you make your jump off this platform and land as the lights go out, lacking the assurance that you've actually made your jump. But of course you have, and there was never that doubtful, but it's the game makes you choose survival over what is convenient, in a purposeful way. In Everything or Nothing, the fact that you died at the end of the mission and they make you redo it from the beginning isn't actually going to teach you anything, seeing as up to that point it wasn't building towards anything. Again, it's just a arena full of enemies that just kind of pile in. And when one shoots you in the back because they spawned in when you hit a button and you didn't know that, there's no design in that. That's just stupid, frankly. So yeah, that's all I mean. It's like, yeah, with 2D games, I always assume there's a reason for why they frustrate you. And in 3D games, I do not think that's the case at all. I just think it was development error. So that's what I have to say about that. But getting back to Everything or Nothing, it is otherwise a very good game. As utilizes the Bond IP well and has a high budget. It's lengthy. I think I read in some reviews, people thought it was too short, which goes to show you what good reviews are. It's probably why the levels have no checkpoints, frankly, is because to pad it out for reviewers. That might be it. I doubt it. I don't think anyone would make such a I don't know. But yeah, it's a good game. The final level it was otherwise enjoyable, but just a lot of enemies that kill you, and they just keep coming from everywhere. Like, they seem to have a better go at outflanking you than you will ever have doing them. My main frustration with the level was I learned that the best way to beat it was actually just not be purposeful at all, just sort of to flippantly ignore all the dangers and wing it. And that's a really good example of bad game design, where the solution was secretly just to not care at all. That's terrible game design, in my opinion. I'm not saying it's bad to put a player in the situation where their best chance is to be brazen and to be on the offense rather than just turtling up. That could be very good game design, but like if it's a well calculated brazenness. But if it's just wanton disregard that wins the day, that's pretty lame. I had a situation with this in another game. It took me a while to figure which out. It was Beautiful Joe 2, where I was fighting, I think, the third boss, maybe it was the second, and I was figuring I need to use my time power sparingly, and it turns out no, that was and do dodges and capitalize in little moments here and there, but instead no, that was not the case. Trick was to just stay in your little slow-mo time and hit him in the leg, and you would dodge most of his attacks, save for one, and fight would be over in no time. Yeah, I didn't find that boss fight to be a very enchanting venture by any means, or fulfilling, rather. So yeah, that's 007, Everything or Nothing, a little more rough around the edges than I remember, but also more expansive in the breadth of its ideas, and that's commendable. Very, very, very commendable. I had a lot of fun with it for that reason. Not all of the ideas land, but, it's a nice change of pace to keep things interesting till the very end. So, that's everything I've been playing for today, and when we return, after this short music interlude, we will talk about a game for the Wii. So, stick around for that. Oh, welcome back. Before I move into the Wii game we'll be talking about, I would just like to thank the fellow who did my music again, that new theme you're hearing especially. His name goes by Frostyn, Frostyn, and he has a website, www.frostyn.com, and check his stuff out. Music he did for me is wonderful stuff, so thought I should mention that again. So I decided last night what Wii game I was going to do today, and we're going to have lucky for me, it's a double feature, because I'm going to be talking about GoldenEye 007. Developed by Eurocom and I think N-Space. Came out in 2010, I think November of 2010. I never played this game when it came out. I played it for the first time in January. I had heard of it before because my older brother was a proponent of it. And it is a remake of the N64 classic. It is it's effectively a new game. That's for it's not a shot for shot remake. They allude to the original in a number of ways. I'm not sure of all of them because I've played that game a while back, but I'm not terribly familiar with it as it is right now. I know a lot of people swear by that game. I don't think I'm one of those people. I think I think the single player might hold up, but the shooting aspect of it has been otherwise outmoded. So, whatever your feelings on the fact that it's not shot for shot remake, mine are perfect. I'm perfectly well and good with it being effectively a new game. Now, speaking of shooting, the main thing to talk about this game is the shooting mechanics and how they utilized the Wii motion controls. You could also use the Wii Classic controller if you wanted to as well. but it was highly publicized that it was gonna really take Wii motion control first-person shooters to the next level and make good on it. Prior to this, I don't know, what was it, The Conduit, that had made such assertions, and I don't know, I haven't played the game directly, but didn't live up to them, is my understanding. And this game, well, I guess the question is, does it live up to the motion controls shooting? I would say yes, with a few caveats. The most remarkable thing about the shooting controls is how customizable they are. And it really makes you think of how many different considerations there are when you are developing a FPS for the Wii, such as camera controls, sensitivity, camera acceleration, dead zones, lock on, things like that, in a way that other first-person shooter wouldn't make me think of. For one thing, I didn't know this prior, but people, when they play Fortnite, my brother Marty pointed this out, if in Fortnite, effectively, your gun where you're shooting is always the center of your screen. And so people put little dots on their screen at the right center, and so they don't even have to aim when they use the gun, so they can shoot from the hip perfectly by just having this little adhesive dot on the television screen, like a little sticky dot. I don't know what the substance of it is. Whereas with this game, because it's a floating reticle, well, that's not the case. That's one difference between it and other FPSs. Another is the fact that you control the camera with the reticle is another consideration. The one thing is there is a portion of the screen that they relegate to a dead zone where you can move the reticle freely with no change in the camera. But the minute it leaves that zone, they will start spinning the camera on its own, just naturally. And so their default dead zone wasn't big enough for me because I didn't want the camera to start moving. The minute I went to go shoot someone in the leg, it would start pointing down. If I was shot up in the head, it would start panning upwards and would throw me off. So I made the dead zone much larger to account for that. And then there's other things like camera acceleration as you leave the screen towards the edge of the screen. I believe I never quite figured it out. The camera would start turning faster. And then there's things like much like in modern first-person shooters where the gun would be on the center of the screen, the developer then wanted the reticle to move back to the center of the screen once you had spun the camera and it had come to a stop. And that, I guess I get the reasoning for that. But in my case, if you were spinning the camera to catch a guy on your periphery, and these guys can go at a pretty good jog, you then would try to chance a shot at him, but then your reticle would snap back. I think there was a customization for this too, like how fast it would go. It would snap back to the center. And so there's all these funny little things that I never thought about and I turned a lot of them off. I didn't like the turn to center thing very much, and I made the dead zone really big, maybe even too big, so I could aim for different portions of each guy or aim for different guys in front of me without the camera reacting to it. Which I think for the first hour of the game, I didn't know if I was even going to like the game because it's just a lot of hassle, a lot of considerations that you, the player, have to make. With another game, the developer would have that all, the developer would have that all predetermined and sorted out. And you, the player, would never have to think about it. But in this case, no, you have a lot of thinking to do, and I guess it's kind of a bad thing, but it's also kind of an enjoyable little peek behind the curtain, if you will. So yeah, but that was all these things I'm talking about now, I suppose. This was all the things I had to figure out going in. And there are other aspects of the controls too, such as there's some motion control gestures that are they feel a little outdated now, but they're harmless when you use them. And one of the more interesting things outside of those silly little motion control gestures is the nunchuck. Prior to playing this game, I thought the nunchuck's motion control was effectively just a shake or a gesture, but in GoldenEye, you have a wall peeking mechanic that's pretty good. I like games that have wall peeking mechanics, where as you tilt the nunchuck to the left of the light, you gently come out of cover in this very one-to-one way. It's really good. It's actually maybe one of my favorite mechanics of the game, that they used it I thought the gyrometer in the nunchuck was so rudimentary that it was good for a shake and nothing else. But I was wrong. And so that's one of the features in this game I like. Moving on from mechanics, as far as the game goes, as I said, it's a remake of GoldenEye, but it doesn't really look like GoldenEye. Like, it kind of has its own style. I would say it looks pretty good for a Wii game. I know they made a remake on PS3 and Xbox 360, and I looked at that just before recording this bit, and it definitely looks better there. Whereas the worst thing I can say about the Wii version is it looks a bit soft, I'd say. Like, some of the models and Daniel Craig's likeness, though you'll never see it, can look a little funny. And I guess another thing, it's not Pierce Brosnan, it's Daniel Craig, which is fine with me. All the other likenesses are different too. There's no Sean Bean or whoever played Oromov in it. It's all new people, new faces. Natalia, different too. I think they got rid of Alan Cummings' character, Boris. So, shame, I guess, but it doesn't hurt too much. But yeah, the game looks pretty good. The level design is, I think, really good, actually. Structurally, I think it's shorter than, it's about an 8-hour game, maybe even a 5-hour if you're good. For me, I don't know, it might have been 9 or 10, but the levels are fairly long. I don't know if there's more than 12 of them, and they're split into, there's multiple levels per one region too, so that's the structure of the game, and it effectively is just works as a level to select like the original GoldenEye, without the big, nice looking grid. But the level, one thing, I suppose I'll get it out of the way, in terms of aesthetics, I wouldn't say this game is terribly reminiscent of the Bond property in general. Like, aside from Daniel Craig, who you'll never see because it's a first-person game, it doesn't feel like a Bond game. It does have a nice rendition of the GoldenEye song not by Tina Turner, I believe, was the original singer, but yeah, it's pretty good. But otherwise, it doesn't have that campy sort of vibe that the other Bond video games would take from and utilize very well, like has in Everything or Nothing, which I previously discussed, but neither was GoldenEye for the N64 either. Like, it didn't have any sort of absurdity, and neither did the GoldenEye movie, so I suppose it's all in step with the GoldenEye outing. So that's all well and good. I would say the problem comes in with the fact that since it has the ability to recreate the movie story better than the N64 game could, it sort of falls flat on its face, in my opinion. Like, it's not. Certain lines and scenes are reimagined or delivered in a way that are just kind of not, done in one take or maybe many takes and they just picked the wrong one. A lot of story points or plot points are rushed through in a way that weren't in the movie, and it's no deal breaker, but I figured I should mention that. Like, if you want a game that captures GoldenEye, which, just to point out, is maybe my favorite Bond movie. Probably not my favorite anymore, but it's up there. That's a great no-nonsense spy thriller as well, as far as a Bond movie could be at that time. So, it might be a little off-putting that they don't deliver on that, but what they do deliver on is a very good level design, and it's a multi-mode level design for the most part, where you can come at it from stealth or you can go loud, and the stealth, unlike Everything or Nothing, the stealth is much more viable. The stealth can be a bit unforgiving. You have a small margin of error in terms of when you're seen and how fast you have to neutralize the person who's seen you before everyone else is alerted to that. But one of the things about the Wii motion controls is that they're so responsive that with that small margin of error, you can actually pull it off. Like in some stealth games, if you have two guys talking to each other, you can only really get one of them before it's hard to get both of them without the alarm going off. And with this game, with its small margin of error, as I've said, you'd think it would be impossible, but the motion controls are so good that you can take them both out in a hurry, and you can aim for their head with that fine accuracy of the IR camera. It's pretty good, and you can use that lean mechanic to obscure yourself until the proper moment. I think you can lean left and right. Yeah, I think you can lean over and back down. It's all very comprehensive. So you can deal with that. And normally in a game where you'd pick stealth, I would always do that. But going loud in this game feels really good too, and the level design is relatively good for that. That's definitely a highlight of this game, the stealth, and just the shooting in general is really good. So even if there is no stealth, you'll still have a good time. Like it's effectively, you can feel like just like a light gun game, popping off guys in front of you in quick succession, really quick. I should mention that it is a little funny to me that in 2010 they had a game where the bodies would disappear after you had dealt with them, like just in front of you. It felt very retro. It almost makes the stealth aspect more believable, though, because, that someone can be dead in front of another guy and they'll never notice because they're not there anymore. So that's a small positive if you have trouble getting immersed in these things. I would say that in terms of levels, the second part of the first level, which is inside the dam facility, is very good, much like how I think that's a favorite level in the N64 game. So that's a very good level. Even the level after it where you're on the lam from that facility is really good, because shooting in a fast-paced manner when you're pressed to do so with accuracy you're very capable of doing that with the motion controls. So all that's very good. After that, there's some kind of a nightclub level that I like simply because of its weird look. Because we didn't really have an ability to portray a crowded nightclub like games can now. They went for this odd sort of neon silhouette look within that level that feels really abstract in a beautiful way. I really like the look of it. So for anything, that level's memorable to me just as a mood piece. There's a bit of shooting in it that occurs afterwards, and it did present a problem to me in the game where, in addition to all the other shooting things you can do, I shut off the Snap 2 that Iron Sight aiming has in modern games, because it's a Wii motion control game. You might as well utilize the full potential of that and not rely on certain kind of crutches to aid the limitation of twin stick shooting. For the most part, that's fine, but if there's a guy on a balcony hidden away somewhere shooting at you, you'd have a really hard time finding him. And that was in that level that showed the limitation of shutting it off. And I still left it shut off because, that's just a consideration you have to make going forward, that there's a guy in the periphery that you can't see, and just have to be perceptive. But that's my one takeaway from the controls in that level. But it's a very good looking level. Afterward, you have maybe a more forgettable level, and then you move on to effectively what's the snow. It's like the bunker level. Like there's a series of levels in the original where it's the bunkers in a snow field or whatever. So this game has a rendition of that, and that's a pretty good level. It's a lot of chances to use stealth, and you effectively have two opposing sides going at each other, and you can help one or play them off each other potentially in an interesting way, or sneak past while they're engaged with one another. So that's a fun aspect of it. The facility level following it, or the bunker, my mistake, is a level that has some vision troubles. That's what my brother pointed out, and he was correct. Probably just due to, again, soft graphics of the game. But, I mean, a lot of Unreal Engine 3 games also had this problem too. Just very gray, dark levels sometimes. Like Witcher 2 particularly, I had a lot of trouble with that. So that hurts it a bit, but still a fun level. If you're really good at stealthing, you can make it work. But, you know, for me, it was a guns blazing level, and it was good for that. The level following it is probably the best level in terms of going loud. Like, there's no stealth in it at all. Very fast paced, and you get to use a shotgun that's the weapon available to you, and that level really makes good use of that. And I'll say that using the shotgun with the Wii motion controls, just kind of using the reticle, aiming down the sights, is really, really tight. I really like that's like when the game's at its best in terms of shooting, in my opinion. Felt really good. But yeah, it's a fast-paced linear level. You have some cover to use, but you kind of have to neutralize enemies before they will converge on you. I should mention that's the archive level, which is in Moscow, I believe. And then that's followed by the tank level that was available in the N64 game. And I would say that this version of that is much better due to the Wii U motion controls, like in the manner in which you can drive and spin the turret is just much more natural and true to a tank than it otherwise would be. I really responsive, really enjoyable, and the tank, because it's a modern tank, is very fast moving. Like they're not slow things anymore. So that feels really good. Feel really powerful. Feels really responsive. Before I forget to mention, this particular tank section is in fact the only vehicle section in this entire game, which is certainly differentiates it from Everything or Nothing. And not that I remember Agent Under Fire terribly well, but it would also, that game had a couple car chases as well. So yeah, the fact that this is the only one in this game, which I don't know, you could maybe accuse of lacking variety, but it's a very solid vehicle section, so it serves its purpose well at the very least. I could maybe go on about additional levels, but the jungle level being a highlight, but I'll move on from the levels now and talk about some of the troubles the game may have and things like that. Now, of course, thus far, I would say this game could maybe hold it against the game that doesn't really use the Bond license terribly effectively. I mean, at least not as much as Everything or Nothing. And also compared to a game like Everything or Nothing is a little one note. But within the main mode of the game, there's a lot of variety between the stealth and the shooting, so I wouldn't really hold it against the game that it's a little more focused than Everything or Nothing. But there are complaints to address, by all means. For one, you could complain that there's a sizable barrier of entry with this game, and that almost turned me off the game for like the first hour. It was felt very overwhelming, and even throughout the game, I would say it felt like I was on like a thin line with the controls. Like it was all set to fall apart, but it didn't, and my setup worked throughout the entirety of the game, with the exception of the final level, which really highlighted my limitation of how I set it up and the limitation of the game in general. In that final level, it's effectively a protect this person, kind of a protect target level, which are never fun anyhow. But in this one, it shows just how deficient the game is at spinning your character, like in other shooters. And I knew that was going to be an issue going in, but yeah, they did not account for it in this level, which makes the level very, annoying and just bad in general. Because there's fellows coming from everywhere and you have to be able to see them and neutralize them in a hurry. Otherwise, they disrupt your little buddy and what they're doing, and then it takes longer, and then some solar flare or satellite flare kills you, and you have to start it all from scratch again. Very, very unenjoyable. Other flaws of the game, I would say, are you don't change weapons very quickly, and that's in a very fast-paced game where the enemies have an aggressive hit scan. That's another problem I have. You need to change weapons, and you need to reload quickly. And yeah, all of this comes to a head in that final level. It's very, very unenjoyable. And the boss fight at the end's terrible too. I don't know why shooters have awful boss fights, but they do. I would say, if I wanted to look at a good example of a final boss, even though it's not the final boss in that particular game, I would look to Halo 3, where the moment you make a brief alliance with the Flood and charge down a enemy-laden corridor, and once you get to the bad guy, it's a cutscene and a swift conclusion to him, and it's very effective, and having the Flood at your side means that you can go through these more powerful enemies with a speed that kind of denotes empowerment and hurriedness. In this game, you fight Agent 006 in an arena, effectively, and you run up to him and point blank shoot him in the face with a shotgun 100 times, which is very silly to look at. And this comes after your long-winded enemy gauntlet that was also awful, so didn't like that at all. And then it ends in the cutscene, or quick time battle, which is, kind of merciful compared to what came before. I had so much trouble with all of this. I eventually just turned on this aim assist mode that was like a baby mode. You just locks onto the guy with his big red reticle and you shoot and don't even have to be on them and they die. Didn't enjoy doing that. I definitely hold the ending of the game against it, but it seems common in shooters, and it's common in Everything or Nothing too, where the ending is just a slog that demands more time than you wanted to give it. In my opinion, endings of games should be a nice plateau, but that's just me, Difficulty should reach its height at the penultimate moment and then just carry over, if I had my way. And in terms of, other complaints, I have mentioned the stealth isn't perfect, but it does its job. It's no Metal Gear Solid 5, but nothing is. It's more akin to, let's say, Wolfenstein New Order, and less gracious, but that's kind of what you're looking at, and it does that very well. And again, the motion controls, how you set them up, there may be ramifications to that, but up until the very end of the game, I had no problems with them. They worked a lot. They worked really well. Just turning can be an issue. So you don't want to find yourself surrounded. But I think that might be really the beginning and end of my complaints. Just that final level, and the enemy's hit scan is a little rough, and the reloading and changing your weapons isn't as fast as I'd like it to be. But other than that, I would say the game does its job. It may not have the variety of Everything or Nothing or the pizzazz, and frankly, I don't even think it looks as good. Everything or Nothing's a great looking game, but its central mechanics are tighter and more versatile in general. Well, maybe not more versatile, but as versatile almost in their own ways. And the level design's much better. Shootings just can't, they're almost polar opposites to compare them. One has a lock on and the other one allows you to get rid of all those first-person shooter console crutches. So, yeah, the inverses in that sense, and the GoldenEye is certainly funner. more fun, funner, more fun. I'm only comparing them because, well, they are both featured on this episode, so why not? I don't really know. I think that might conclude my feelings on GoldenEye. I know there's multiplayer in the game, but I haven't played it, so maybe I'm doing the game a disservice by not having actually fiddled with that. But maybe next week I'll update this review if I find that changes anything. I feel like my complaints would still kind of be the same. It seemed from watching my brother play it, it was a decent kind of arena shooter, more the old style of multiplayer shooters than, let's say, what COD 4 ushered in. And it still had people playing on it 9 years after its release, so there are people that clearly like this game. So that's noteworthy. That's probably a point in its favor, but I didn't really deal with that. I didn't play it in 00 Agent either, which makes the game cool. I don't know if it makes the game more interesting, but my brother seemed to enjoy doing that. He played it just prior to when I played it. We're going to move on to the number score phase of this review. And initially, I figured I'd maybe give it a 6.5 out of 10, which is, again, like 65 on Metacritic is a poo-poo game, but not on my scale. But, yeah, 6.5 on a 65 in Metacritic. My meaning game's very lacking, but on my scale, it's very far from the truth. And going back to Everything or Nothing, as I was playing that, it really occurred to me just how good the shooting mechanics in GoldenEye were, at least in the campaign. So I figure, maybe 6.5 is a little low. The game outside of its shooting, and some reasonably good level design and some functional stealth isn't otherwise incredible. Like, makes a lot of kind of mistakes in terms of that genre, like bad hit scan and maybe even lackluster weapons too. But the shooting, the thing it's doing, it's kind of frankly one of a kind. Like, outside of Sit and Punishment, which is its own separate thing, you're not getting a lot of actual shooters on the Wii. And this game showed me, the real challenges in doing one, but also showed me the benefits of it and how, frankly, lived up to that potential. It's a very hands-on, dedicated experience. You have to be dedicated enough to actually follow through, but it's very rewarding. I think I'm forgetting to mention that with the Wii motion controls, the spray and pray approach is way more interesting than in other FPSs, where if you were just sort of spraying from the hip in an FPS, it's sort of just a wooden movement side to side. Just not satisfying at all with the Wii remote. Find yourself in a tight hallway where there's 4 guys and you're just kind of out of reaction spraying bullets at them. It feels really satisfying because the finer movements of going up and down, trying to catch one of them in the face as you're just spraying back and forth. And that's like that one thing really would stand out to me, in particular with the motion controls, and using the shotgun felt really good, especially if you were able to move the camera just to get the guy who was running towards you and had entered your periphery, and you adjust the camera and catch him on the edge of the screen. That feels really good. I wouldn't want that left unsaid. Just those finer high points within the shooting. And again, the story kind of falls kind of flat. Like, it doesn't, not that that really matters to me in a video game. I think, in my opinion, stories hinder more than they help, especially if they're too overbearing. So that doesn't really matter too much. It's just not a point for it. And overall, I would say the game isn't terribly multifaceted. It's an otherwise very pointed experience only, with reasonable level design and good stealth. But the only thing it truly exceeds in is as a shooter, comparing it to FPS, is the motion control shooting that feels really great in a number of ways. And it has a bunch of the blunders of other shooters, such as terrible boss fights and some QTEs that are stupid, but those are few and far between, mostly saved for the end. So I figure this game, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. It lands on its core conceit reasonably well, not flawlessly. There's a lot of fiddling you have to do to get it right to your preferences. I didn't think their default was any good, But the dead zone they had, the camera would just spin willy-nilly the minute you tried to make any change targets, and maybe you get used to that, but I didn't think that would be any good. But the core conceit they get down right, and everything else around it they execute reasonably well. But just some, I say they're small complaints, but they're actually pretty big. The weapon switching and the hit scanning do hold it back and make it more frustrating, and particularly the hit scan. They call this an immersion thing on my part, where I'm just how do I put it, fussy. I'm just fussy about, like, when it comes to how many bullets I take in a FPS. It hurts the immersion, even though I find that word to be, again, very hoity-toity, fussy nonsense talking about that. But if you're taking as many bullets as the Terminator, then the game should be a Terminator game. You're not a super cool spy if you're just eating shots left and right. In a shooter, I want the ability to execute kills perfectly without putting bullets into them, without taking a bunch of bullets in me first. So the hit scan, it just makes the experience less gratifying. But again, to praise the controls, you can keep the enemies in check as long as they're kind of in front of you. On the side, you might have some issue, but that's just inherent within the controls. So I figure this game gets a 7 out of 10 because the visuals are fine for a Wii game. I don't know if the music's terribly great. Story's not incredible. Level design is, again, pretty good. Shooting's great. Stealth is reasonable. Yeah, and of course, to reiterate, 7 out of 10 means a very good game. A solid game that accomplishes most of what it's going for. Some niggles. My real complaint being the end of this game would be my huge complaint, but otherwise a few niggles and some lackluster components don't hold this game back in any meaningful way. I'd say it's a worthy purchase. Great Bond game. I don't know if it's the best one. It could be. I know people like Nightfire and GoldenEye, but this game was it does its job and is one of a kind in one particular way. And in talking about I didn't think I'd ever play it again. I might one day, just for the shooting. It feels really, really good. Maybe next week I'll update on how the multiplayer feels. But who knows? Now that the score has been given, we will move on to ranking it with the other game. And that, of course, being Punch-Out. Would I put it higher than Punch-Out or lower? And, one could say that this game utilizes the hardware far greater than Punch-Out does, so that's a point in its favor, but it's really not a contest. I would say Punch-Out's a considerably better game, tighter experience, also kind of really only going for one thing, but there's no complaints I have about Punch-Out. No oversights, I would say. Punch-Out's a great game through and through, whereas this GoldenEye has some, peripheral issues. So Punch-Out is a better game than GoldenEye, but GoldenEye is still very, very good. And well, it really wasn't a hard deliberation for me. If you want to disagree, you can send me an email, by all means, and I'll read it on the show. Now that they've been ranked, Punch-Out being the number 1 Wii game and GoldenEye being number 2, we will wrap up today's show. You can, again, if you have comments on this, you can reach me at nalistenerq@gmail.com. I've said before that the Q is capitalized. I don't think the Google email recognizes that, so it's lowercase. So what I said before was wrong. It's not an uncommon occurrence. And but you can reach me at nalistenerq@gmail.com. And thanks for listening if you did. Have a well and worthy day.